The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty trading post outside Flagstaff, where weathered cowboys and grizzled prospectors gathered around wooden tables, their voices carrying tales of impossible journeys through the unforgiving landscape of the Colorado Plateau. Among them sat a young Apache boy named Ayanna, no more than 16 winters old, his dark eyes reflecting the ancient wisdom of his ancestors, while his calloused hands gently stroked the coarse fur of a small, seemingly frail donkey that stood barely 3 feet tall. The animal's ribs showed through its patchy coat, and its left hind leg bore the unmistakable signs of an old injury that had never properly healed, causing it to favor one side with each labored step. "That pathetic creature won't survive 10 miles in these canyons," sneered Jack Morrison, a burly cattle rancher whose red face spoke of too many years under the desert sun and too many nights with a whiskey bottle. His words carried the weight of decades spent traversing these treacherous lands, where even the strongest horses had been known to collapse from exhaustion or plummet into hidden ravines that split the earth like gaping wounds. Morrison's weathered boots kicked up small clouds of dust as he circled the unlikely pair, his cruel laughter echoing off the wooden walls of the trading post while other patrons nodded in agreement, their skeptical murmurs filling the stifling air. But Ayanna had heard such words before, spoken in different tongues by different men who failed to understand the sacred bond between his people and the animals that shared their harsh homeland. His grandfather, a respected medicine man of the White Mountain Apache tribe, had taught him that strength came not from size or appearance, but from the spirit that burned within all living creatures, and this small donkey possessed something that the mocking cowboys could never comprehend. The animal's name was Zit, meaning mountain in the Apache language, and despite its humble appearance, it carried within its chest the heart of a warrior that had been tested by trials these white men had never imagined. The reason for Ayanna's desperate journey lay hidden in the remote canyons of the Superstition Mountains, where his younger sister Nazcha had vanished 3 days earlier while gathering medicinal plants for their tribe's healing ceremonies. The Apache search parties had returned empty-handed, reporting that the treacherous terrain and sudden rock slides had made their traditional routes impassable, leaving them with no choice but to abandon hope and prepare for the worst. But Ayanna refused to accept defeat, for he alone knew of an ancient trail that wound through the most dangerous parts of the canyon system, a path so narrow and perilous that only the most sure-footed creature could navigate its crumbling ledges and hidden pitfalls. As the sun reached its zenith and cast harsh shadows across the desert landscape, Ayanna loaded his meager supplies onto Zit's back, ignoring the continued taunts and predictions of doom from the gathered crowd. His provisions consisted of dried meat wrapped in leather pouches, a water skin that would have to last them through the scorching heat, and a collection of rope and climbing tools that his father had crafted from materials found in their mountain homeland. The weight seemed almost too much for the small donkey to bear, yet Zit stood steady and patient, its intelligent eyes reflecting an understanding that went beyond mere animal instinct. "You're sending that boy to his death," whispered Sarah Henderson, the trading post owner's wife, her voice filled with genuine concern as she watched the young Apache make his final preparations. She had seen too many travelers venture into those unforgiving canyons with confidence and modern equipment, only to have their bones discovered years later by other unfortunate souls who had ignored the warnings carved by wind and time into the canyon walls. The Superstition Mountains had earned their ominous name through centuries of claiming lives from those who dared to challenge their ancient secrets, and the sight of this determined boy with his crippled donkey filled her heart with dread. But Morrison's response carried only mockery and calculated cruelty, his voice rising above the desert wind as he placed bets with other patrons on how quickly they would find the boy's remains scattered across the canyon floor. The rancher had made his fortune by understanding the brutal mathematics of survival in this harsh land, where weakness meant death and sentiment was a luxury that few could afford. In his mind, the young Apache was nothing more than another foolish dreamer who would join the countless others whose ambitions had been crushed by the unforgiving reality of the American Southwest. Unknown to the jeering crowd, Ayanna carried with him knowledge that had been passed down through generations of Apache warriors and hunters, secrets about the hidden springs and sheltered caves that could mean the difference between life and death in the trackless wilderness. His grandfather had spent years teaching him to read the subtle signs that nature left for those who knew how to look, the way certain plants grew only near underground water sources, how the flight patterns of birds could reveal the location of safe passages through otherwise impassable terrain. As the unlikely pair disappeared into the shimmering heat waves that rose from the desert floor, the mockers returned to their drinks and card games, already dismissing the Apache boy and his donkey as another tragic footnote in the ongoing story of the untamed frontier. They could not have imagined that this journey would challenge everything they thought they knew about courage, determination, and the unbreakable bonds that could form between man and animal in the face of impossible odds. The first day of their journey took them across relatively easy terrain, where scattered cacti and hardy desert shrubs provided occasional shade from the relentless sun that turned the air itself into a living thing that burned their lungs with each breath. Zit moved with surprising steadiness despite his apparent infirmities, his small hooves finding purchase on loose rock and shifting sand where larger animals might have stumbled and fallen. Ayana walked alongside his companion, conserving both their strength for the challenges that lay ahead, his trained eyes constantly scanning the horizon for signs of the ancient landmarks that would guide them toward the treacherous mountain passes. As evening approached and painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, they reached the mouth of Dead Man's Canyon, a narrow gorge that had claimed so many lives that even experienced guides refused to enter its shadow-filled depths. The walls rose on either side like the ribs of some massive prehistoric beast, their surfaces scarred by millennia of flash floods and rockslides that had carved impossible shapes into the living stone. Here, the temperature dropped dramatically as the sun's rays could no longer penetrate the narrow opening, and strange echoes bounced back and forth between the canyon walls, creating an otherworldly symphony that had driven more than one traveler to madness. It was here that Ayana made his first disturbing discovery, something that would haunt him for the remainder of their journey and challenge his understanding of what had really happened to his sister. Scattered near the canyon entrance lay the remnants of modern camping equipment, expensive gear that no Apache would carry, along with the unmistakable tracks of shod horses that had been traveling in formation like a military patrol. The implications sent a chill through his body that had nothing to do with the cooling desert air, for he realized that Nazca's disappearance might not have been the result of a simple accident or the natural dangers of the wilderness. The second hook that would grip viewers came with the realization that they were not alone in these supposedly empty canyons, as strange lights began to flicker in the distance like fallen stars, moving in patterns that defied explanation and seeming to watch their every move. Zit's ears pricked forward in alert attention, his nostrils flaring as he detected scents that were foreign to this desolate landscape, while Ayana felt the ancient warnings of his ancestors stirring in his blood, telling him that they had wandered into something far more dangerous than the natural perils of the Superstition Mountains. As they pressed deeper into the labyrinthine canyon system, following trails that seemed to disappear and reappear according to some logic that only the desert understood, Ayana began to piece together a conspiracy that reached far beyond his sister's fate. The evidence was subtle at first, scratches on rock faces that looked like surveyor's marks, traces of recent excavation hidden beneath carefully arranged stones, and most disturbing of all, the discovery of a hidden camp where armed men had obviously been staying for weeks or possibly months, their presence a violation of the sacred lands that belonged to his people. The truth that slowly emerged was more shocking than anything the mockers at the trading post could have imagined, involving corrupt government officials, illegal mining operations, and a systematic attempt to drive the Apache from lands that held both spiritual significance and untold mineral wealth. Nazca had not simply vanished while gathering plants. She had stumbled upon evidence of this conspiracy and had been taken to prevent her from warning their tribe about the impending threat to their ancestral homeland. Through 3 days and nights of incredible hardship, where its seemingly impossible endurance and sure footing proved to be their salvation time and again, Ayana followed the trail deeper into the heart of the mountains. The little donkey navigated ledges so narrow that one misstep would have meant certain death, crossed raging streams swollen by distant thunderstorms, and climbed steep rock faces that would have challenged a mountain goat, all while carrying their vital supplies and never once showing signs of the weakness that the mockers had predicted would doom them both. The climax of their adventure came when they discovered the hidden mining operation deep in a sacred canyon, where Nazca was being held prisoner along with evidence that would expose the entire conspiracy if it ever reached the outside world. But freeing her would require all of Ayana's cunning and Zit's incredible abilities, as they faced armed guards, treacherous terrain, and the constant threat of discovery by men who would kill to protect their illegal enterprise. In the end, It was the very qualities that the mockers had dismissed as weaknesses that saved them all, its small size allowing him to navigate passages too narrow for horses, his quiet nature enabling them to approach undetected, and his incredible endurance giving them the strength to complete an escape that covered impossible distances in record time. The Apache boy's deep knowledge of the land, combined with his donkey's remarkable abilities, proved superior to all the modern equipment and supposed expertise of their enemies. When they finally emerged from the canyons 3 days later, carrying evidence that would eventually send corrupt officials to prison and protect Apache lands for future generations, the same crowd that had mocked them stood in stunned silence at the trading post. Zit, the donkey they had pronounced unfit for the journey, stood proud and alert despite having just completed one of the most remarkable rescues in frontier history, while Ayana held his recovered sister in his arms, both of them living proof that courage and determination could triumph over the seemingly impossible odds that the unforgiving American Southwest could devise. The story spread throughout Arizona territory and beyond, becoming a legend that would be retold around campfires and in trading posts for generations to come. A testament to the power of believing in yourself and your companions when the whole world seems determined to prove you wrong. Morrison and the other mockers learned that day that true strength could not always be measured by appearances, and that the bonds between man and animal could accomplish miracles that defied all logic and expectation. Years later, when Zit finally passed away at the remarkable age of 32, having sired a line of donkeys renowned throughout the Southwest for their incredible endurance and intelligence, Ayana would tell visitors that his companion had been touched by the spirits of the Ancient Ones, blessed with abilities that transcended the physical world and connected to the eternal strength that flowed through the sacred mountains of their homeland. The grave of Zit still stands today in a quiet valley of the White Mountain Apache Reservation, marked by a simple stone cairn that travelers often visit to pay their respects to the little donkey who proved that greatness can come in the most humble packages, and that those who mock others for their apparent weaknesses often reveal far more about their own limitations than about the true character of those they seek to diminish. The trading post outside Flagstaff eventually closed as the frontier gave way to modern civilization, but old-timers in the area still tell stories about the Apache boy and his remarkable donkey, reminding new generations that the most extraordinary adventures often begin with someone brave enough to ignore the voices of doubt and fear that try to convince us that our dreams are impossible to achieve. But the story of Ayana and Zit carried consequences that rippled through Arizona territory for decades to come, transforming not just the lives of those directly involved, but reshaping the entire relationship between the Apache people and the encroaching forces of American expansion. The evidence that Nazca had discovered and that Ayana had risked everything to recover proved to be far more extensive than anyone had initially realized, documenting a network of corruption that reached into the highest levels of territorial government and connected influential businessmen in Phoenix and Tucson to systematic theft of Apache lands. When federal investigators arrived from Washington to examine the materials that the brave Apache boy had brought back from the hidden mining operation, they uncovered financial records showing that millions of dollars in gold and silver had been extracted from sacred Apache sites over a period of nearly 5 years. The operation had been protected by falsified geological surveys that claimed the lands were worthless, bribes paid to territorial officials who turned blind eyes to obvious illegal activity, and intimidation tactics that had silenced previous witnesses through threats and violence. Jack Morrison, the cattle rancher who had been so quick to mock Ayana and predict his failure, found himself under intense scrutiny when investigators discovered that his ranch had served as a way station for smuggling precious metals out of Apache territory. His cruel laughter and confident predictions had masked his own involvement in the conspiracy, and his intimate knowledge of why the canyon journey seemed impossible stemmed from his role in ensuring that no Apache witnesses would survive to tell their stories. The man who had placed bets on how quickly they would find the boys' scattered remains had actually been hoping to collect those remains himself, adding them to the growing list of disappeared Apache who had gotten too close to the truth. Sarah Henderson, the trading post owner's wife whose genuine concern had seemed so heartfelt, proved to be one of the most shocking revelations of the entire investigation. Her worried whispers about sending the boy to his death had been calculated performances designed to establish her apparent innocence, while her husband's trading post had served as the primary communication hub for coordinating the illegal mining activities. The couple had grown wealthy by serving as intermediaries between corrupt territorial officials and the mining syndicate, using their position as trusted members of the frontier community to gather intelligence about Apache movements and potential threats to their operation. The rescue of Nazca had disrupted a carefully orchestrated plan to eliminate the final witnesses to crimes that had been ongoing since the early days of territorial expansion, and the evidence she had gathered included detailed maps showing the locations of dozens of sacred Apache sites that had been systematically plundered. Among the most damaging documents were letters signed by Territorial Governor Marcus Williams himself, authorizing the use of military resources to suppress Apache resistance to what he termed legitimate mining development, knowing full well that the activities were illegal and the resistance was justified. As news of the conspiracy spread throughout the territory and beyond, public opinion began to shift dramatically in favor of the Apache people, who had been portrayed by government propaganda as violent obstacles to legitimate development but were now revealed as victims of a systematic campaign of theft and murder. Newspapers in cities as distant as San Francisco and Denver picked up the story, praising the courage of the young Apache boy and his remarkable donkey while demanding justice for the crimes that had been committed against his people. The legal proceedings that followed became a landmark case in territorial law, establishing important precedents for the protection of Native American lands and the prosecution of government corruption. Morrison and 3 other conspirators were sentenced to lengthy prison terms, while Governor Williams was forced to resign in disgrace and flee the territory to avoid federal charges. The Henderson Trading Post was seized as evidence and eventually converted into a school for Apache children, its transformation from a center of conspiracy to a symbol of education and hope serving as a powerful reminder of how justice could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances. Zit became something of a celebrity throughout the American Southwest, with visitors traveling hundreds of miles just to see the little donkey who had accomplished what seasoned frontiersmen with the finest horses had declared impossible. Newspaper articles described his remarkable feat of navigation through treacherous canyon terrain, his ability to carry vital supplies across distances that would have challenged much larger animals, and his role in exposing corruption that might otherwise have continued unchecked for years to come. The White Mountain Apache tribe honored both Ayanna and Zit with special ceremonies that recognized their contribution to protecting sacred lands and preserving the safety of their people. Ayanna was granted the ceremonial name Bayadehozo, meaning one who brings truth from darkness, while Zit received the rare honor of being declared a guardian spirit whose descendants would be forever protected by tribal law. The ceremony drew representatives from Apache bands throughout the Southwest, creating a unified celebration that had not been seen since the early days of resistance to American expansion. As years passed and the frontier began to give way to modern development, the story of Ayanna and Zit became incorporated into Apache oral tradition as a teaching tale about the importance of perseverance in the face of mockery and doubt. Elders would tell children about the young warrior who ignored the cruel predictions of failure and trusted in his own knowledge and the strength of his animal companion, emphasizing that true wisdom often came from sources that others dismissed as weak or insignificant. The partnership between boy and donkey also influenced Apache horse breeding and animal husbandry practices, as tribal members began to pay more attention to the qualities of endurance and intelligence rather than focusing solely on size and appearance. Zit's bloodline produced generations of donkeys renowned throughout the territory for their remarkable abilities, and Apache-bred animals became highly sought after by travelers who had learned to value reliability over impressive appearances. When Zit finally passed away at the age of 32, having lived far longer than most donkeys of his era, his death was mourned not just by the Apache people but by settlers and officials throughout Arizona territory who had come to recognize his symbolic importance in the fight for justice and truth. His funeral drew hundreds of mourners from diverse backgrounds, creating an unprecedented gathering that demonstrated how the story of the mocked donkey and his devoted companion had transcended cultural boundaries to become part of the larger American frontier legend. The simple stone cairn that marks its grave in the quiet valley of the White Mountain Apache Reservation continues to attract visitors more than a century after his death, serving as a pilgrimage site for those who seek inspiration from the story of courage triumphing over impossible odds. The stones have been worn smooth by the hands of countless visitors who come to pay their respects and to remind themselves that greatness can emerge from the most unexpected places when dedication and love overcome the voices of doubt and fear. Today, the legacy of Ayanna and Zit lives on in the protected status of Apache sacred sites throughout Arizona, in the legal precedents established by their courage, and in the continued telling of their story to new generations who face their own challenges and moments of doubt. The trading post outside Flagstaff may be gone, replaced by modern highways and strip malls, But the memory of the Apache boy and his faithful donkey serves as an eternal reminder that those who mock others for their apparent limitations often reveal far more about their own character than about the true potential of those they seek to diminish.